we are so happy to collaborate on a global level with markets in, sorry, there was with markets in APAC and the US. You can go back to the first slide, Pritam. So looking at Stockholm, where I'm based, and my beautiful background, it's actually considered to be the next or the leading new innovating food tech hub in the world. And that is due to the wonderful entrepreneurs, as I mentioned, also the VC companies, the incubators, the government incentives, and the different kind of um, food industry associations that we see are collaborating on a global level. For instance, Stockholm is host to the Food Tech Big Meet, one of the largest food tech conferences that take place yearly in June. Due to the pandemic, it was a digital event last year, but we are all hoping and of course planning for a physical event for 2022. So we are also taking some steps looking at the agenda goals, and the last week there was UN Food Summit where actually our Prime Minister Stefan Löfven stated that it is a global challenge to reach the agenda goals by 2030. And Sweden wants to take a part in this work and work towards a sustainable and healthy food consumption for the consumers. We want to be part of the food waste reduction on a global level, and also make sure that different kind of R&D developments are in line with the green transition that Sweden and the world is facing. So if we go back one slide, Pritam, I would like to just show you our overview of some of the Swedish strengths. May I ask you to go back one slide? Thank you. So I just briefly and very short, here are some of the strengths that we have identified from Business Sweden's side when we speak to different kind of stakeholders, other government incentives, and also to the companies, and when we look at investments to different kind of Swedish companies. So Sweden has a strong food safety. We are one of the leading countries when it comes to animal welfare and the lower use of antibiotics for meat production. And we're also considered to be sustainable at quite an early stage, but not of course enough. But Swedes are interested in sustainability and sustainable products. There's a growing health awareness to provide safe and healthy food for the citizens. Sweden also holds a very strong organic food production where we actually have higher demands than other leading European markets. We're known for our innovative niche products. Some of them we'll be presenting here today. And we're also very proud and impressed by all these agile companies. They're excellent in marketing, in getting consumers to change their food behaviors, perhaps try something new like a vegan sausage. We also have a strong competence for quality with R&D facilities on a higher level in Sweden. And we're also known for our digitalization and the speedy way to that this is also incorporated into food production. So looking at the next slide. Here are some of the categories that we have used for today's webinar. And as you know, we will talk about new innovative foods where plant-based proteins plays a huge part. Sweden also has some investments and projects going into marketplace and food home delivery services, something that has grown during the pandemic. Also, our focus on food waste, indoor farming, precision agri-tech, different kind of sensors and bioenergy. So for today's topic, we have decided that we want to focus on the most innovative parts between our countries, and that is the new kind of products and proteins when it comes to innovative food. We are also looking into new ways of producing things and how things can be produced in a better way for the climate and for the consumer. And also, lastly, we will talk about food security. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will continue now with the exciting program. So I will introduce as a next step our speaker, Dr. Babita Bora, that is lead program with Indian Chamber of Food and Agriculture. She holds a PhD in animal sciences, special focus on integrated farming system, and she has over 10 years experience working with international research and development organizations. So I think without any further ado, we will hand the mic to Dr. Babita Bora. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
welcome.
Yeah. Good morning and good afternoon. Those who are in Sweden, good morning, and those who are in India, good afternoon. So my name is Babita Bora, and currently I am working with ICFA as a lead programs. Recently, I have joined ICFA. So today my focus is more over the current overview about the India agri-food tech, as well as how what are the opportunities we have in India, what are the challenges, and how they are overcoming through the technologies uh, for these challenges. And at last, I will also discuss about how the ICFA works with different international organizations and with different industries. So the first slide, I would like to, can you please show the first slide? Yeah, the next one. This is an overview about Indian agriculture. So, India agriculture plays an important role in Indian economy. Around 58% of India's population is depending on agriculture for their livelihoods. Being a food secure nation, now India is moving forward to innovative and technological use in agriculture, so that it can also stand as a global leader in agriculture sector. So with that, India's share of agriculture and allied sector in gross value added of India is at current stood at 17.8% in the financial year 20. The Indian industry is poised for huge growth, increasing its contribution to world's food trade every year. Moreover, Indian food and grocery market in India is sixth largest, with retails contributing 70% of the sales. The Indian food processing industry accounts for 32% of the country's total food market. Furthermore, principal agriculture commodities exports for April 2022 January 2020 has increased was US dollar 32.12 billion. So next slide. The agri food market, if you talk about agri food market in India, the export market is growing, and for agri produce it has huge around 38.54 billion in last financial year. The agri tech sector has opened up numerous market opportunities in the country market linkages. The key focus area for agriculture tech, agri tech startups is improving for supply chain, and it helps to farmers get better price for their products. This is interesting that India accounts for more than 450 startups in the agri-tech space, which means that every ninth startup is opening in India, starting in India. The government has also played a catalyzing role in the growth for Indian agri-tech sector. So government has also supporting for this agri business, how we can make our agri business sector as a global industry, agri industry as a global industry, with the help of technology, with the help of research and development, and with the help of improving the farming communities and making them aware about the technology, innovations, and research and development. Next slide. Next slide, please. The first one, previous one. The challenges but our traditional agriculture sector was facing was like there was no uh, price. The farmers were not knowing what were the price. That was volatility in input prices, suboptimal in input selection. So adoption of technology in agri-tech is helping to solve these several pain points for India across the spectrum of traditional agriculture, with the helping in agri value chains, market in market. The focus what limited access to technology and limited access to technology for efficient cropping. So that was also a problem, a constraint for growing the agriculture industry. But this is also improving with the help of technology and innovation. Yeah. Uneven quality and lack of large scale taxing. This is like traceability, monitoring for the quality of products. But this is also improving with the help of technology. And India, this is interesting that India has a network, internet is available everywhere, even in the remote areas. With the help of that technology, we can now can search forward for the improving this quality products, quality material of agriculture, and this can also help in farming communities as well as the industry people, which will improve the agriculture business. Lack of access to financial services in the traditional agriculture system, there was like problem with the financial services. People were, like farmers were not knowing from where they will get the financial aid. So with the credit, financial credit, and as well as the crop insurance, it's improving their agri business sector. Post harvest supply chain. The technology is playing an important role in the post harvest supply chain issues. And it's really helping farmers.
Dr.
It's a win-win.
Babita,
Yes.
Rahul Mishra, sorry for interrupting. I think so. We are just running out of a time.
Okay.
If you could just
Okay.
probably in another 1 minute, if you could help us summarize your last few slides, it will be
Okay.
really helpful. It's wonderful sharing your opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, and then we have in India, we have lots of opportunities like increasing demand with the urbanization and with the increase in income. The farm in India, the demand for agriculture products and produce is increasing. So smart opportunities. There are lots of smart opportunities for the agriculture sector, like people are moving forward the warehouses, cold storage. So for that they are using the technology. So this can be an opportunity for the technology sector. Government support. Government is really supporting the agriculture sector, the agriculture industry, as well as the competitive advantage. There are like India has the wonderful agroclimatic zones. It has 15 agroclimatic zones. With any crop can grow. All the weathers are in India. There is a opportunity to grow any kind of crop in India. So these are the opportunities in India we have. Next slide. So this is we are like Indian Chamber of Food and Agriculture. We work as a think tank for various policy and industry sector. We are collaborating with different stakeholders with their interest areas, facilitating domestic and international trade and agribusiness. Acts as a platform for knowledge sharing and global partnerships. Next slide. So this is the areas where Indian Chamber of Food and Agriculture is working: policy and research, agri startups and produce organization facilitation, global platform for dialogue and partnership, national knowledge on resource center, trade facilitation and global market access, quality stewardship programs, farmer market access. So I think in Sweden and India, if we can collaborate together, there are amples of opportunities for both of the countries. So we look forward for more collaboration and more coordination, more working together in every sector actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Babita. That was wonderful, an excellent presentation about the India overview. And we look forward for greater collaboration between Sweden and India together on this platform. Now going to the next discussion, which will be a panel discussion, but hosted by our knowledge partner, Nicole Roque, who is an innovation specialist from the Good Food Institute in India. She's leading a smart protein corridor initiative focused on building business and knowledge ties in protein innovation between markets like Sweden and India. Experience in as investment specialist with Invest India and advisor to life sciences groups, including pharmaceuticals and biotechnology business in India. She's worked across entry advisory and policy advisory and grievance redressal in multiple markets in North and South America. I call upon Nicole Roque to take it ahead from here as a panel moderator and presenting more about the Good Food Institute and their work with smart proteins. Nicole.
Thanks so much, Rahul. I'm just going to share my screen. So, just give me a second. Okay, great. You have it up. Thanks so much. So very quickly, for those of you who are not yet familiar with our organization, Preetham, if we could move to the next slide, please. The Good Food Institute India is part of a network of global non-profit agencies. Put very simply, we work with scientists, with entrepreneurs, with investors, and other stakeholders who are diversifying the protein sources for a more sustainable, healthy, and just food system. If we can move to the next slide. Over the course of the next 10 minutes, I really just want to set context for the upcoming Innovative Foods panel that I'll be hosting and just share where India and where Sweden really fits into this global discussion. Moving very quickly to the challenge that we have ahead of us. In 2019 alone, around 2 billion people globally faced food insecurity. As global population increases, we're going to need food systems that supply at scale to address the expansion in demand due to upward social mobility, increased urbanization, changing demographics, etc. Preetham, next slide, please. So we're looking at roughly a 56% food production gap by 2050. This increase in demand will likely be met through an increase in production. The implications for these changing patterns of growth and demand, specifically for animal-sourced foods, will require structural changes to the global livestock sector. This means massive, rapid intensification that will likely cause a shift towards an industrialized model of animal production, optimized for cost and efficiency, and thus adding significant pressure on dwindling natural resources. Preetham, next slide, please. Next slide. So the key question that really drives our work at GFI is how are we going to feed 10 billion people by 2050 through systems that do not negatively impact climate, biodiversity, and scarce natural resources. Our current food systems creates a whole host of sustainability-related issues. For example, animal agriculture contributes more to climate change than emissions from the entire transportation sector combined. This system is also fundamentally inefficient. If we take the chicken as an example, it currently takes about 8 calories of food in the form of feed to get back 1 calorie in the form of meat. Apart from this, about half of the world's habitable land is already devoted to agriculture, a vast majority of which is currently used for livestock production. And finally, there are all sorts of public health issues that emerge from animal agriculture, including and most urgently antibiotic resistance due to the overuse of antibiotics within animal agriculture, both as a veterinary medicine, but particularly as growth promoters, which threatens our own ability to treat infectious and non-infectious diseases moving forward as antimicrobial drug resistance grows. Next slide. So in terms of how this where India really sits within this entire context of animal agriculture, contrary to popular misconceptions, 71% of Indians do attest to eating non-vegetarian. This is a category which includes meat, seafood, and eggs, with respondents citing income rather than religious strictures as the major impediment for not eating non-veg more frequently. Next slide, please. Although India's per capita meat consumption is among the lowest in the world, with increased demands and urbanization, meat consumption per capita is poised to grow. Much of the protein demand over the next decade and beyond is going to come from emerging markets like India and China. So by the time we get to 2050, we're looking at between a 50 to 70% increased demand in protein. Next slide. At GFI India, we think a major aspect of this solution is through the use of smart proteins. Next slide, please. We want to meet consumers' demand for the meat they love in a way that is both better for the world and better for business. Next slide. At GFI, we define smart protein as products which can reliably and predictably substitute animal-derived meat, eggs, and dairy because they perfectly replicate not just the sensory aspects, but the cultural aspects as well of eating this food for consumers. Next slide. Smart proteins fit into three categories from a production, cost, and infrastructure point of view. This can be created using plant proteins to specifically replicate their animal-based counterparts and also offers significant advantages in terms of reduced environmental pressures associated with those same animal products. Secondly, fermentation technology has emerged as an enabling technology for the alternative protein industry to create both ingredients as well as standalone products, leveraging microorganisms such as filamentous fungi and bacteria. And finally, you have cultivated meat manufactured using animal cell culture techniques to create genuine animal meat or seafood products that is composed of the same cell types arranged in the same three-dimensional structure as animal muscle tissue. I'm going to skip through a lot of the explanation for each of these individual categories just to save on time. So Preetham, if we could skip through to the next section of the presentation, please. Great. In India, we're seeing plant protein emerge as an emerging trend. If we can move to the next slide, yeah. So in consumer research studies that were conducted by GFI both in 2018 as well as in 2020, we've seen an increase in the positive disposition, not just in the awareness about what these products are, but also consumers more likely to try these products as well as purchase them if they do find that they taste as well as taste the same as well as provide the same nutritional benefits as conventional meat does. Next slide. The opportunity really is to service this sort of early adopter cohort that we've been able to identify, which currently looks very similar to the demand that you might see within New York or Sydney or Australia. What this cohort really looks like is young, upwardly mobile, internet-connected, in parts aspirational cohort that really does exist within the country. Apart from this as well, there's also an underlying culture of guilt associated with eating non-vegetarian food in India, with religion designating certain days of the week and times of the year as holy, where animal meat and eggs are unfit for consumption. So what we're seeing is that this creates a sort of underlying tension where many young people are eating meat outside of the home, but continuing to live and feel guilty about it. So it's important to note that this underlying need states, that there's drivers for sort of these meat replacement products exist, whether that's intrinsic to planetary health or extrinsic like religious or social pressures. So manufacturers of these plant-based foods are no longer just targeting the vegetarian or the vegan population. Instead, they're also looking at both omnivores and flexitarians as their consumer market, which of course is a much larger opportunity. Next slide. Next slide. So while plant-based options started off, with ingredients like soy and jackfruit, which really acted as a mimic of the texture of meat, what we're seeing right now, specifically over the last couple of months, we're seeing products getting launched. Next slide, getting launched in across different formats, from main meals to snacking items that really resonate with consumers. And the market for all of this is really just taking off after years of ecosystem building work and all the disruptions that were associated with the pandemic as well. This graphic provides a small sampling of these sort of next generation companies that we're calling plant-based meat or plant-based dairy or plant-based egg companies. And these companies are really innovating quite rapidly, and we're excited about the opportunity to drive broad consumer awareness in the mass market because of these products that are being developed. But it's important to remember that in India has a vast population, and the smart protein market in the country will continue to present open spaces for international businesses to see as viable opportunities. Moving beyond that early adopter cohort that I just mentioned of about 50 to 75 million people in the top cities, accessing a huge target of millions more means creating superior products that can scale, and we'll talk about that a bit later. Next slide, please. Next slide. The alternative protein industry is projected to take a significant chunk of the global total protein market, with estimates ranging from about 3% by 2025 to about 60% by 2040, depending on how you want to look at it. Next slide. But investments too have really skyrocketed. Last year, we saw venture capital as well as private equity investments reach $3.1 billion globally, which is double the amount of all the investments to date. Next slide. Plant-based investments tripled while fermentation investments doubled. Although cultivated meat saw the smallest absolute amount of investment, we did see the largest increase, growing 6 times from 2019 to 2020. Next slide. And APAC as well has seen significant amount of investments, 6.1 times what was seen from any previous year. Next slide. A lot of this growth that we're seeing in alternative protein consumption is really being driven by critical drivers of taste, price, and convenience. We've seen price reductions being announced globally by the likes of Omni Pork and Impossible Foods. We've also seen significant distribution increases in both retail and food service, making these products more accessible. There's also been many exciting innovations on the taste front. Next slide. But there is a long way to go before we do reach price parity as well as global widespread distribution. And this is especially critical for India, as I was mentioning earlier. The true opportunity is not just that early adopter market in the urban mega cities, but the hundreds of millions more in the true mass market. Getting these will require improvements in taste profiles, in prices, in ingenuity, in bringing products in different formats that will really allow scale across the length and the breadth of this country. This is where technologies and businesses from advanced market can help excel and help us open up the Indian market in a further win-win. India offers very specific opportunities to the international alternative protein market. Like the previous speaker, Dr. Babita had also mentioned, India's agricultural biodiversity presents an opportunity for plant-based protein companies worldwide to leverage some of these underexploited, diversified high-protein crop varieties that could really lend themselves to, superior functionalities and inherent nutritional completeness, as well as cleaner label products. Apart from that, we also have a robust workforce and a globally renowned biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical manufacturing industry that can do a great deal to really drive down the cost of alternative protein products globally. At Good Food Institute India, as Rahul had mentioned, we're working on what we're calling smart protein corridors. At this stage of where the Indian ecosystem currently is, we believe that there are advantages that we can derive by developing and leveraging cross-country relationships with more mature ecosystems to accelerate the rate of not just technology, but knowledge transfer into the Indian ecosystem as well. Maria and Cecilia had both sort of highlighted the advantages of the Swedish ecosystem. And we do see merit in sort of advancing the India-Sweden smart protein corridor, specifically across these three buckets of engagement. The first one being with knowledge institutes and universities. Cecilia mentioned, the forward-looking nature of some of these agricultural universities, and we're really looking to leverage that with our own universities in India, where we can leverage, joint collaborative research projects that can advance the sector globally, as well as with business and investors, and finally with governments and policymakers as well. With that, I'd like to pause, and I think it's a great time to sort of hear from our panelists. First, we have Daniel Rubin. He's currently the head of strategy and special projects at Stockholm-Dreamery in Sweden. Daniel is a mentor for several food tech accelerators and an advisor to some of the leading ag tech and food tech startups in Europe, North America, and Africa. Prior to that, Daniel has also worked as an expert for the World Bank in Washington, D.C. On issues around technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. In his role as a consultant with the Rockefeller Foundation Food Initiative, supported the foundation's work to advance a more nourishing and sustainable food system. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Next, we have Ram Kumar Nair, who is the founder and CEO of Mycorrhiza. Ram has over 8 years of research experience and 3 years building a biotech startup. Ram is specialized in handling multidisciplinary projects, focusing on resource utilization, and fungi biotechnology. Welcome, Ram.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Khan, managing partner and co-founder of Omnivore Venture Capital. Mark co-founded Omnivore in 2010 and is also the chairman of the Confederation of Indian Industries Task Force on Agri Startups and a member of the governing council of the Maharashtra State Innovation Society. Prior to this, Mark was the executive vice president at Godrej AgriWorld, one of India's foremost diversified agri-business companies. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
It's a pleasure being here.
And finally, we have Abhishek Sinha, founder and CEO of Good Dot. For Abhishek, it's really about the ethical benefits of plant-based lifestyle that are the major driving forces behind Good Dot's activities. With the focus on taste, price, and shelf life of its products, Good Dot has a unique and distinct approach to mainstream meat alternatives across the globe. Abhishek also has wide expertise in strategic alignment, product development, process engineering, and the regulatory landscape. Thank you for joining us, Abhishek.
Thanks, Nicole. Lovely to be here.
With that, I think we should just get started. So I'm just going to go around the room and ask each of you a question about what you do in the context of the market that you currently operate in. We'll start with you, Daniel. You've worn many hats across the alternative protein landscape. Would you give us an overview of what the ecosystem currently looks like in Sweden and the various areas of work that you have undertaken?
Sure, and you gave such a nice presentation to me earlier, so I don't think I need to really go in deep into what I've done. But obviously, I'm advising some startups in the food tech and ag tech space in Europe, Africa, and North America, mentoring at some accelerators, supporting some VCs as a venture partner. I run a food tech newsletter called Food Tech Weekly and a podcast called The Appetizer. So, and my daytime job is I'm working for Stockholm-Dreamery, developing plant-based cheese. So lots of work, but let's delve into the ecosystem, which is really exciting. I think the Swedish entrepreneurial ecosystem for tech and innovation and startups in general is very strong. We have really good policy and regulatory. There are several world-class VCs here. There's some very strong educational institutions. For example, we have the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, which is ranked number 3 in the world after Wageningen in the Netherlands and UC Davis in California. Tech infrastructure is good. The labor force is skilled. There's risk tolerance. We have really curious consumers willing to try out new and crazy stuff. There's this strong push in society for more sustainability in nutrition. Greta Thunberg is from here. There's some really good accelerators, including in Norskin, focusing on impact. They're opening their second space now in Kigali, Rwanda. And there are some very successful startups that are inspiring other entrepreneurs to start out. I mean, you all heard of Truecaller and Spotify and Minecraft, just to mention a few. And in the food tech space, I'm sure you've heard of Oatly, the plant-based dairy company, and they IPO'd over $10 billion earlier this year. And I think this strong entrepreneurial ecosystem rubs off on food tech as well. A lot of entrepreneurs that made exits in tech are now starting food tech companies or investing in them. And this has helped make Sweden one of, I think, the leading food tech innovation hubs in Europe. Last year, European food tech startups raised 2.7 billion euros, according to Digital Food Lab, and Sweden was about 10% of that, so 260 million euros. And that made Sweden the number 4 destination in Europe for investments in food tech after the UK, France, and Germany. And there's everything from ag tech companies like Volta Green Tech, they're growing seaweed to block methane emissions from cows or livestock. Eriot doing wireless control of irrigation, Ecobot farm robots. There's surplus and waste management companies like the Karma food rescue app. There's urban farming, vertical farming startups. There's a lot of going on in smart packaging, sustainable packaging. Innocentia is one example with a team in India. There are e-grocers, last mile delivery companies popping up left and right. There's a lot happening in retail tech and marketplaces. TrustTrace is an example there, I think, of traceability. There's tons of consumer apps. And there's a lot of next-gen food companies. Stockel Dreamery is trying to become the category leader in plant-based cheese. There's Hooked Foods for plant-based fish. There's Sprout for pea-based milk. Nix for sugar-free ice cream and candy. They're expanding a lot in the US. Expect to hear exciting news about them soon. So all in all, I think the ecosystem and the food tech ecosystem is very healthy and vibrant and well-funded and really hungry to advance a better food system. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for laying that out and for really giving us an overview of what the ecosystem looks like now. I think it's a good time to move to Mark. Mark, at Mycorrhiza, you are creating plant-based meat products from fungi by leveraging fermentation technology. Would you tell us a bit about the genesis of Mycorrhiza, as well as where you fit into the current food tech landscape that Daniel so clearly laid out for us?
Yeah, sure. I guess you pronounced Mark, but my name is Ram.
I'm so sorry.
No worries. No worries. I mean, you already gave a good introduction, as Daniel was telling. I mean, I am originally from India, so I have my roots back in South India. I came to Sweden in 2013 for my PhD studies. So by profession, I'm a fermentation engineer, and I have my PhD and postdoc in the same area that we are working. What we are basically doing is creating mycoprotein. I mean, if I go back to your presentation, one of the key point in the whole plant-based segment is fermentation itself. And we have mycoprotein as one of the main upcoming ingredient in one sense. And that's again our approach to work with all plant-based companies, more like a B2B approach where we can enable all these new generation food companies to create more sustainable products. I mean, in that context, we have discussed with Goodalt, and also like we have had discussion with Stockel, and I personally know Daniel as well. So there's a lot of collaborations that we see already happening in the space, and that is what we are also leveraging on to create more sustainable alternative for peas and soy. So there is another category coming up, so people can really try new things, not just go by already existing ingredients. And speaking about Mycorrhiza, we are currently one of the leading company in the space in Europe, and we are the only ones in Scandinavia doing mycoprotein. And we are growing quite big in terms of like the scale, which is a critical part in any ingredient businesses, as you already know. So we are building our first production scale capacity, which could cater pretty much the Scandinavian market in 1 year time. So that's what we are planning now. It's a $40 million investment that we are making in Sweden. And we are 25 people now in the company. So we are growing quite big in the last 3 years. There's a lot of growth that happens, both in terms of technology development and also in terms of the market development that we see. A lot of even large, big companies are interested in getting into the space. I mean, if I speak in the Swedish context, there is, pretty much industry leading companies that are now venturing into like plant-based segments, and they are looking for new generation alternatives because they already see that the market trend is clear with the plant-based growing up, and then peas and soy already taking a big part of the pie. And then they are now looking into like, what is next? What is a new generation ingredients that they could make? And in that context, we and Mycorrhiza and the protein Promic, it's kind of already positioned in a very strong segment, I would say. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ram. And I want to hold on to that point that you mentioned about, conversations that you've already started having with Abhishek. I'd like to hold on to that and maybe bring that up later in the conversation. Quickly switching to the Indian ecosystem. Mark, agricultural technology in India has matured quite significantly over the last decade, specifically since Omnivore Ventures first entered the game. Could you take us through what the ecosystem looked like when you first started and where we are now? Mark, you're on mute.
Sorry, it kept auto-muting me for some reason. So yeah, I mean, it's been a slightly crazy and a very long journey. When we started all of this, the ecosystem didn't really exist. That was why we initially started Omnivore, was that we saw that innovative agriculture and food entrepreneurs weren't really being backed by generalist VCs. There was very little capital in the space, and the first 5 years were, I would say, a combination of lonely and brutal. And at the same time, what you have in India is a massive agricultural ecosystem of 130 million smallholder farmers, roughly 25% of GDP if you take all the agribusiness into account, and more or less half of the employment in the country. And so this was too critical a space for India's future to be ignored, and that's why we helped this get off the ground. Today, it's obviously very different. There's quite a bit of agri-tech investing activity, quite a bit of innovative food investing activity. It's certainly come a long way, but massive challenges remain in terms of trying to address the core issues with Indian ag, which we see as kind of 4 big challenges. One being the challenge of farmer profitability. Farmers in India simply don't make enough money to survive. Second being the challenge of farmer resilience. They essentially, even if they have a good year, the next year is terrible, right? There is simply too much stress. Any startup entrepreneur knows what the fear of everything falling apart is like. Well, that's the experience of 130 million farmers every year, and their families, right? So about 600 million people in total. And so farmer resilience is a huge issue. Agricultural sustainability is the third issue that our portfolio companies work on. How do we reduce the usage of natural resources in the system? How do we reduce the wastage and spoilage in the system? And finally, catalyzing climate action. India is on both sides of the climate issue. Agriculture accounts for 20% of India's emissions. So that's something that has to be dealt with. And India is also one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change. So we're dealing with both the mitigation of greenhouse gases and resilience and adaptation for this agricultural system. So everything in our portfolio is generally hacking away at least one, if not multiple, parts of this problem. Alternative protein for us is a relatively new space. It's one that we've been active in intellectually. It's not one that we've invested in yet. We've collaborated quite a bit on thought leadership with GFI. We've done lots of workshops. We've judged lots of startups. We think we'll probably take a bet in the space in the next year. We're not a super consumer focused fund, so a lot of the bets in the space are really very consumer oriented. But we think the applicability and relevance in India for alternative protein is interesting, right? It's I don't think it is the slam dunk that everyone thinks it is. I have said this many times, right? In America, if you want vegetarian food, burgers, fake plant-based burgers that bleed are very appealing because you are historically from a non-vegetarian family. right? Your ancestors ate meat, your parents ate meat, you grew up eating meat. Maybe you're a flexitarian now, maybe you became a vegetarian or a vegan, but you have that taste. You would say the taste for blood. In India, if you want to eat vegetarian food, you eat vegetarian food. While 70% of India is non-veg, the way that I like to describe it is the default setting in the operating system that is Indian culture and society is set to vegetarian. You have to ask for meat in India. The default meal you are given is a vegetarian meal. The default restaurant is a vegetarian restaurant. You will see a red dot on every bit of packaged meat in this country, specifically to let people know, don't eat this, it has animal products in it that aren't dairy, to be clear. We think a little bit differently about dairy here. And so we think it's an interesting and to be clear, worthwhile problem to solve. We just think it is radically different from flexitarianism in the West. We think it is radically different from China moving away from, consuming every form of animal protein imaginable, right? This is a very different system of meat consumption where even the people that eat meat eat it very rarely. It is flexitarian by default. Hindus, right, have seasons where they don't eat meat, things like Shravan. There are many people that don't eat meat on 2 or 3 days of the week. So in general, right, this is not a system where meat eating is ubiquitous. It is not a system where meat eating is by any stretch of the imagination close to the level seen in the West or in our neighbors to the east. It is a very different system. That is not to say that there's not opportunity. That's not to say that there isn't the chance to substitute, especially processed animal products, for plant-based substitutes and eventually fermented and cellular. It is just very, very different. And it worked in Silicon Valley, so it will work here approach, we think is absolutely foolhardy, because we think, practically speaking, the market that you're playing at here is not vegetarians, right? The 40% of the country that is vegetarian, they have a great solution for what they want to do in terms of remaining vegetarian, which is to say the default food, right? And for the 60 to 70% that eats meat, that eats it not all the time, right? We think that segment is broken into 3 parts. A large part of that segment are among the poorest people in this country. The one thing to remember about vegetarianism in India, in the West, vegetarianism is left-wing. In India, vegetarianism is right-wing. In the West, vegetarianism is progressive. In India, vegetarianism is conservative. Vegetarianism in India is linked to income. It is linked to caste. The richest people in this country are vegetarians. So that's why a lot of people in the West, they're like, no, Indians are vegetarian. No. The Indian diaspora is vegetarian because those are the people who could afford to leave. That's why your professors who are Indian were vegetarian. That's why your engineering co-workers and your doctors were vegetarian, because it is linked to income, because it is a proxy for caste. And so all of these things have to be understood when you're looking at the opportunity here. So the opportunity here then becomes, who are the people that are upper income that are also meat eaters? Because that's where you're going to build that's where you're going to start in any kind of product like this. You're not going to make a product for the bottom billion in this space, not yet, maybe in the future. So it's a unique ecosystem that has unique challenges, and dumping Silicon Valley nonsense here is not exactly going to work.
Thanks for that, Mark. And I think it's a good time to bring in Abhishek as well, because I think Good Dot was one of the first, I would say, smart protein companies in India, and they have a very unique approach to their product format, as well as their product offerings. So Abhishek, you began Good Dot about 5 years ago, where the ecosystem was even more immature than it is right now, and category awareness for these products was near zero. So really want to ask you about what your journey has been like and how you have seen this specific ecosystem grow over the last 5 years.
Is he still on? It seems he might have dropped out.
Oh, oops. We'll get back to Abhishek, I think, when he's back. But I think now could be a good time. can move into the focus of this session really, which is building smart protein corridors, unlocking opportunities for technology transfer, licensing, business relationships, trade, government partnerships. And we think, which is a hugely important piece for the development of the Indian ecosystem, as well as a model for other developing countries as well. Daniel, we've regarded you as our sort of informal gatekeeper of the India-Scandinavia smart protein corridor. And we've highlighted across this session various strengths I think that Sweden and India each bring. What would you see as some of the foremost opportunities of collaboration across a Sweden-India smart protein corridor that you can pinpoint and that we can really get started and get moving on?
Wow, big question. Obviously, the two markets are incredibly different in terms of GDP and size and number of inhabitants and per capita income and so on. But I think those differences can be leveraged, for a good thing. For example, of course, if you're an innovative Swedish company, but maybe you need some R&D dry powder, you have some of the world-class, high-skilled people in India that you can leverage, and we've seen several companies do that in Sweden. Of course. Vice versa, if there's an Indian company looking to break into Europe and they want to have forward-leaning consumers, curious consumers, they want to have a base, a foothold in the European market, Sweden is not a bad place to start. There are mission-aligned investors, mission-aligned people. I spoke with SenseGrass, for example. They're obviously not in the protein space specifically, but in the ag tech space, and they're interested in using Sweden as a bridgehead. So I think there are many opportunities for startups and companies to leverage each other's strengths in India and Sweden to sort of fast forward or pour some rocket fuel on your growth. I notice Abhishek is back, so I just want to make sure we have time for him.
Thanks. Hi, Abhishek.
I'm so sorry. Actually, there was some network issue, power outages. Anyhow, please go ahead.
No, don't worry. So I think we ended at a very interesting point. Mark made a very interesting point as well about specific requirements of the Indian ecosystem. And I think Godot from the beginning has always sort of positioned itself on price accessibility and scalability. You also entered the market and the ecosystem when there was relatively no awareness about what these products are at all. So if you could just give us an understanding of what your journey has been like then, and what have you seen has happened over the past 5 years?
Sure, Nicole, thank you so much. So I see things very differently than what Mark perceives and what he sees. So our experience, our hypothesis is a bit different. So having looked at, it's right that 72% of Indians are meat eaters, and the other 28% are vegetarians. But even in your presentation, you found the biggest reason for people to eat less meat in India is because of the income. There is a challenge in the affordability of protein. Animal protein is seen as a premium product, even to many Indians. So thereby the price will be an important aspect. And definitely there are a lot of people who are willing to consume meat. Interestingly enough, through our distribution partner, which is in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, even towns and villages, we have seen a large-scale adoption and repeat purchase of plant-based meat products. So it's quite interesting. I think time will be giving the correct answer, but we do believe that there is a significant willingness of Indians to try out plant-based meat. They do have vegetarian values, and if it is they are provided a product which has no animal exploitation in it, but it tastes like meat, I think that opens up a very different opportunity in India. So that is where we are coming from, and we are quite excited as how things are growing. As I said, the customer stickability is quite high in the space in our own experience. So it's a challenge to make them try, but once they do try, they believe, and they come back for repeat purchases. So this is where we are coming from, and we're quite excited about the space. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I want to move back from the consumer side of things to the producer side of things. I think we mentioned, we believe as well that India has specific advantages, particularly with regard to its agri biodiversity. And for that, Mark, I'd really want to come back to you. We're a country that produces some of these high protein substrates like millets and oilseeds, but we're really in need of technology interventions to create a sort of range of value added products that can also increase farmers' income. So what kind of intervention in fundamental technology and IP development do you think are required to get to a place where we can actually position India as a sort of smart protein ingredient supplier to the world?
Look, this goes to a very complicated issue. And that complicated issue is that in general, while India punches above its weight globally, well above its weight, with respect to digital technologies, hardware and software, in the life sciences space, India punches insanely below its weight to a degree to which you would be shocked. The provocation that I oftentimes say, and everyone's probably heard this now many times if you listen to these seminars, is that there are more Indian passport holders doing cutting edge life sciences and synthetic biology work in the city of Boston than in the entirety of the subcontinent. It's a weird phenomenon of the startup ecosystem, of the talent ecosystem, that in life sciences to date, there is still very little entrepreneurship. And the best and the brightest, as they did in digital technologies a generation earlier, continue to migrate abroad. And so solving the challenges of innovation, and this is true in terms of synthetic biology for human health. It's true of synthetic biology for agriculture. It's true of innovations for innovative food. You still don't have deep pools of talent yet. I think there's some people that are trying to work on this space quite a bit. We are for sure, GFI is, but the reality is there is a talent gap, there is a funding gap, there is an understanding gap. Right? The average venture capitalist in India understands digital wonderfully. Life sciences is they've never done any deal flow. I can think of 3 VCs, maybe 4 in India that have ever done a life sciences deal. Right? I can think of 50 VC funds in Boston that focus only on life sciences. Right? So it's a very different system. A lot of the alt protein innovation that we see in India right now are essentially consumer plays. Right? They're consumer plays that are doing formulation. Sometimes they're using imported, right, pea protein. It's deep innovation isn't yet happening. It's happening in pockets, right? And it's not to say India is bad at food processing. We have the CFTRI in Mysore. We have NCL in Pune. There's lots of people, but it's not that surplus of talent that you have in the digital and kind of startup space generally. And so this is a real problem that goes beyond alternative protein into this general area of life sciences and kind of, you know, innovation in chemical and biological kind of areas. So I think there is insanely high potential for India to eventually become the alternative protein ingredient supplier to the world, right? We're the largest producer of pulses in the world, largest producer of millets in the world, right? Farmers do not capture a lot of value for that. And so there is potential to build businesses where farmers capture value because you're doing, right, value added processing and selling to the rest of the world. Early days, you have players like Proeon that are trying to do just that. There are a few other startups in that space, but it's still very, very nascent. And most of the startups that we see right now doing alternative protein in India are essentially consumer plays. But we're very bullish that there is going to be entrepreneurship in this space. But I think what is making it move a bit more slowly is this challenge around talent, facilities, right? That is true of the entire life sciences ecosystem.
With that, Daniel, if we could quickly go back to you and talk a bit about how the Swedish ecosystem can really come in here, how we can sort of leverage some of these collaborations to really move some of that forward, to move aspects of talent development forward, to move aspects of product development forward, bring in funding for activities like these.
I think the first step is just we need to collaborate more. We need more sort of exchange students going both ways. PhDs like Ram. We need 1,000 people like Ram. We need more. I think smarter government funding focused on particular pieces of the food system challenges that we need to solve and leverage each other's strengths. We need. I mean, there are gaps in for example, I mentioned that the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences is ranked number 3 in the world, and yet they spin out almost no startups. So there's this huge missed opportunity of turning that world-class leading research into actual startups that have, that's making true change on the ground, and that's a huge pain and a missed opportunity. So I just, everywhere I turn, I feel this sense of urgency to solve the challenges we're facing. There's a lot of smart people out there. We need to connect them, and we need to step it up, because it's so urgent what we need to do in terms of environmental challenges, nutrition challenges, animal welfare challenges, and so on. And so every time I meet policymakers and people not currently involved in food tech, I'm telling them you need to do food tech, and we need to have more international collaboration to solve these challenges, because it's not enough for Sweden with 0.1% of the world population to solve our challenges if we don't help the rest of the world to solve their challenges, and vice versa. So I could go on for a very long time, Nicole.
Thanks for that. And with that, I think this would be a great time to bring you back in, Ram. Mycorena's ProMyc mycoprotein has really important implications, both in terms of efficiency and sustainability, and could really potentially translate into nutritional and price advantages for low resource developing country environments like India. So if we could go back and sort of ask you about what kinds of international collaborations you've already cemented, as well as how you would look to leverage this kind of cross-country collaboration as well.
Absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, I have seen both sides. Like, I mean, I have been growing up in India, doing my early studies there, and now I'm doing company in Sweden. So I can see it from both angles. And going back to what Mark and Daniel said, there is a huge leverage that we can take out of the competence of both the countries, like Sweden being like very high cutting edge technology development. But at the same time, as Daniel already mentioned, it's a very small population here. So scalability is a big challenge when it comes to finding resources and stuff like that. Whereas if we go back to the Indian perspective, that scalability might be much easier in that sense, because there is already resource there in terms of like the supply chain, larger population. So we could leverage that too in a very smart way, and also it goes back the other way around as well. So from what we see is like, okay, now we are doing things in Sweden, we are scaling up, building our first factory. But even I tell my investors, like, this is probably not the only factory that Mycorrhiza will have. Perhaps we will go and scale in India or in China. So in that perspective, there is a large, approach that we can make out. But the main underlying principle is like, one single company cannot do this, or if they are doing it, it takes a lot of time. I mean, I have even tried it in the beginning, like to find places in India where we can scale. And I, being an Indian myself, I find it super difficult to land on a right partnership. So then it comes to the fact that there should be like a system that is supporting companies to go there, to build that corridor, or to build that kind of collaboration approach, enabling companies that they can help out when we are already there. Like, for example, if Mycorrhiza is going there, we need a system to back us up. And that's already happening in other industries very much. Like if you take Volvo, Scania, Ericsson, they all have development centers in India, big, huge centers, even like 10 times bigger than what they have in Sweden. But that is initiated and it's kind of coordinated in a very structured, harmonic way. There is a long-standing relationship between, the governments, for example. There's a long-standing relationship between the Sweden Business Council and stuff like that. But that's all in that tech space. And now it's time for us to bring it to the next segment, whereas Mark was mentioning, like India has everything that is needed to support that growth. And that's what we are looking for. That's what we should initiate. And GFI could be a great partner to build that corridor already and bring in more actors into the space. And companies are we are on the other side. I mean, we don't see that, necessity until there is a system already in place. Otherwise, it will be difficult for one single company to go and build that relationship. It has to be in a structured, organizational, different actors playing in it. That's how we see it, actually.
Thanks for that. And yeah, I think we do believe that India offers supply chain advantages as well to the international alternative protein ecosystem, and can do a great deal to sort of drive accessibility and drive down costs of some of these products globally. And with that, Abhishek, if you could help us identify what some of these strengths are and opportunities are for collaboration of this kind to really expand the accessibility of these products globally.
So I think it's a two-way process, Nicole. First of all, of course, access to markets outside India. For example, Europe can be a very big market. Sweden can be a base for because there are a lot of innovative policies and progressive policies in Sweden. As Daniel was mentioning, a lot of startups and very friendly policies are there. So that could be a launch pad for European expansion for the Indian startups from here. And on the contrary, there's 1.4 billion population which is protein starved, and also looking for innovative technologies. There could be some interesting relationships wherein on the basis of trust, as market access can be provided to some of the startups which are having cutting edge technologies in Sweden to India. Because I think that can be a happy marriage. It all comes down to who are mediating it, who are the parties who are coming together, and how is the regulatory environment. Because even in India, I think a lot of things needs to be eased out and legal protection needs to be given to a lot of IPs to be for the company standards. But I do believe India very soon will be the most populous country in the world, and that too food is going to be both an opportunity as well as one of the significant challenges for India. As you mentioned, feeding 10 billion, that's a global population, but India in itself is a massive part of the 10 billion population. So it is a challenge, but it's a very, very big opportunity. People who are able to understand the market, have the good relationship and crack it will reap the most benefit. It's a huge market and a huge opportunity. Yeah.
Just to that point about, I think, the opportunity presented by this sector sort of globally, Daniel, you're a venture partner to an impact accelerator in Sweden. What do you sort of make of this opportunity presented by alternative proteins to the global food sector, and what do you make of the investment landscape globally as it stands right now?
Yeah, let's start with the latter. The market is very hot, maybe too hot. There's more and more early stage and growth stage VCs raising funds right now in agtech and food tech, and perhaps in protein in general. I mean, Lever VC, Big Idea Ventures, Agronomics, Good Protein Fund are just some examples of funds that raised, or enclosed big funds recently. And there are some other big ones out there raising, like New Crop and Dow Foods and Stray Dog and Clear Current Capital and so on. And there was data from Ag Funder coming out recently saying that globally food tech companies and ag tech have raised $24 billion this year. That's very close actually to the $30 billion that was raised in 2020. So the first half of this year almost saw as much growth or investment as the entire 2020. And of those 24 billion invested so far this year, 2/3 are in the US and China and India. So it's fairly concentrated to those three markets. I mean, there's so many large challenges to solve in the food system, from increasing productivity to reducing food waste and post-harvest food loss to helping consumers shift to more sustainable and nourishing dietary patterns. So I want to think that all this investment frenzy is justified, that startups and investors feel this sense of urgency to solve these challenges, and that's not just a big crazy bubble brewing. In terms of alt protein and the opportunity presented, we know protein demand is increasing by 60% towards 2050. Of course, demand is not the same thing as need. And we know that we're using the most biodiverse places on earth, like Brazil, to grow soy, and we're replacing fish with plastics in the ocean. People see these issues, and we know that the food system is a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of freshwater use, half of all vegetated land use, and animal farming is a big chunk of this. So it's obviously something we need to solve. So I think plant-based is definitely part of the solution. Eventually fermentation-based, perhaps in some areas cell-based as well. It's clear to me that it's going to win market share. We don't know where it'll plateau, but it will happen. It is happening.
Thanks for that. And Mark, for your closing views, we really love your insight on the investment landscape in India. We've seen a number of companies this year raise successful pre-seed and seed rounds, including Good Dot. So what opportunities do you see for investors in the region? I know you've alluded to some of the producer side opportunities, but what opportunities are you seeing play out in the Indian market? And when will we start seeing mega food corporations and FMCG companies start investing in the sector and really getting involved in scaling access to these products across the country?
Sure. I mean, look, I think there are probably three opportunities, maybe more, but I would say kind of three big opportunities here. Like one is basically what's been done in the West so far, which is, you know, plant-based. I'm gonna focus on plant-based because I think for now, right, talking about fermented and cellular in India is still a bit more off. I think it will come eventually, but I think how it's dealt with will be very interesting. And I'm going to focus on meat because meat and eggs, because I wanted to sort of take milk off the table. Milk is a very culturally sensitive issue in India. You know, where even the vegetarians, right, are very wedded to it. So what I would say is, you know, I think one big opportunity is what the folks at Good Dot are doing, right? They're working on creating plant analogs for the kinds of use cases that are relevant in India. Burgers are not relevant in India, right? They're eaten by some people sometimes, but it's not a fundamental part of the food here the way it is in the West. You know, so there's a lot of opportunity in various Indian formats, whether it's tikkas or biryanis or what have you, that, you know, analogs that can go into, you know, a gravy dish, a curry. So that's obviously an opportunity. We can debate the size of that opportunity, but thankfully India is big enough that, you know, even if you're focused on the top 50 million households or 100 million households, that's still quite a bit of people. You know, so that's one. The second is I genuinely believe that there is a real opportunity to create processed non-meat analog protein products for the vegetarian population. The reality is that India is a massively, you know, malnourished, sort of, it's broadly malnourished in different ways. And one of the ways is that generally people here don't eat enough protein because the diet is so carbohydrate centric, and a lot of the protein that people consume is not actually as accessible as they realize. So if we can create protein products for vegetarians that don't taste anything like meat, right, but that make protein more accessible for someone who is a vegetarian, I think that's a very powerful idea, a very good idea. And I think that can address some of the endemic malnutrition that India has always struggled with because of kind of sociocultural factors. And then finally, I think there's a great opportunity in you know, plant-based supply chains where we look at India, you know, either as a raw material exporter or hopefully, right, an ingredient exporter, or ideally a value-added product exporter that takes, you know, our low-cost manufacturing base and uses that to export to the rest of the world, where the desire for, you know, I have no debate on the thesis of plant-based analogs in countries that eat meat every single day, where most of the population eats meat. I have debates about the extent to which, you know, people have imported that thinking into India without necessarily looking at the country we actually live in. And so I think there's a great opportunity there. I think over time there will be opportunities in cellular. I think over time there will be some very significant opportunities in fermented. Again, the one thing that I will go back to again and again and again, and I know I sound like a frickin' broken record, this is a smallholder agricultural economy of tiny producers. We have 300 million head of cattle, but we have 80 million dairy farmers. So each person who's owning cows and buffaloes are generally owning 3, maybe 4. When we start, you know, that's our dairy supply chain, okay? Our goat supply chain, our mutton supply chain, are farmed, not even farmed, grazed by some of the poorest shepherds in the world. Products are entirely organic. There is not a drop of animal health product used in our entire mutton value chain, right? Everything is essentially free range, grazed. I'm not saying the life of a goat is great, but I'm saying it's not a industrialized part of our agriculture. If I think about, if I think about aquaculture, you have a bit of industrial ag in shrimp, but in fish you don't. If I think about poultry, that's a bit more industrialized. But even then, it's still, right, smallholder contract farmers working with aggregators and integrators. My big fear about plant-based is that we are going to destroy the economic existence of these people for whom livestock is a major source of value, it's a major source of savings, it's a source of survival. And we're going to turn the value chains over to the largest food processing companies in the world. So we're going to basically wipe out the economic existence of a shepherd in Rajasthan with 20 goats so that 6 multinationals can make money. And that is the ethical,
I think it's important to
dilemma
note.
that sorry, what?
I think it's important to note that we're not talking about replacing these systems, but rather supplementing the increased demand that is likely to.
I'm just saying that when you're talking about plant-based in America, I am 100% on your side, okay? Like, go fix that industrialized mess. When you're talking about doing this in a smallholder agricultural system that is barely industrialized, it is a very different ethical quandary.
I think with that, it's important to note that the Indian market presents, it's a vast population. There have been points that have been brought up time and time again about income being an impediment to protein consumption. I think there's opportunity enough for all of these different supply chains to come into play and for all of them to exist with each other. I don't think there's one solution to this problem. I think there's going to be multiple different solutions that do present itself. And within this context, I think that we can all agree that protein demand is going to increase over the next coming decade. We're going to see multiple solutions feed that problem and feed that increasing demand. And so with that, I think we're out of time as well. I'd really, really like to thank all our panelists today. Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Ram. And thank you, Mark, so much for taking the time and sharing your very honest and candid views with us and the audience today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to you, Nicole, for a very inspiring session. Many, many interesting notes from this hour. So thank you to our guests, and let's take a short break and see you back in 5 minutes for our next topic, sustainable food production. And this session will be performed in presentations from 3 different companies. So see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back. Hello, everyone, and to our next part of this exciting agenda is sustainable food production. And looking at the speakers, we will have 3 different keynote presentations, starting with Anders Andersson, who is a Chief Strategy Officer at Spaudi, Sweden. And they are focusing on building energy efficient solar powered micro water irrigation systems. And this is to be incorporated for the smaller food producers around the world. So touching base a little bit about the topic from the previous session about how to make sure that we are also providing solutions for the millions of small farmers around the world. So we're looking forward to introduce Spaudi, a Swedish company, and welcome Anders Andersson.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me okay.
Perfect.
I'm calling in from Spain today, where we have our European test facility and logistics center. Today I'm going to talk about the water drop initiative that we created. It's actually it's a pilot and it's a way of getting your systems out there to the smallhold farmers, because we have a system that we know is working. We have tested it again and again, and it's been tested by government authorities in India. So we have it verified by several functions and international testing companies. So now it's all about distribution and actually micro distribution or micro logistics, as we call it, because we know that in order to get these systems out to the end users, we need to build a relationship with them locally. And we do this by training field agents. And we are launching the Water Drop Initiative together with SIVA, which is an organization in India with well over 1.5 million members, and SIVA is short for Self-Employed Women's Association. Women are traditionally the family member who is in charge of irrigation on the farm, in a smallhold farm. So we are focusing a lot on women and making them understand the benefits of what we do. And the Water Drop Initiative then is about the world's 500 million 1-acre farmers who produce, and I know this is debatable, 70% of what we eat. Some people say it's less. There are recent research saying it's maybe only 1/3 of what we eat who are produced by the smallhold farmers. I'm not going to go into that, but it's a debate. And how to make how to make them more profitable, how to make them more self-sufficient, and how to make their life easier. That's pretty much what we focus on. And it is a smart farming solution that consumes less energy and water and releases absolutely no CO2 emission. And it is available to empower these farmers to move in the direction of becoming more profitable and self-sufficient. Next slide, please. This is a picture of our CEO standing behind our system. So basically what it is containing of is a solar panel of about 1 square meter, a pump unit that Henrik is holding, and a power management box that are actually running the whole show. It's the heart of the system. That it's a pneumatic pump, so we actually pump water with air, not with rotating impellers or anything, which makes it very, very robust. Next slide, please. This is just a picture of the result that we managed to achieve in 6 weeks after starting to irrigate with our system at our demo facility outside of Bangalore. And it's interesting. I mean, we do this in a very controlled environment. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult to do it in the field, but we need to test our products and the equipment and the products of our partners again and again and again. So we've actually set up a few of these test facilities. We have one outside Bangalore in Doverspet. We have one here in Spain, outside of Malaga. And we have one in Sweden, and we're building one in Florida in the near future. So we need to be, you know, local and be able to invite people and show them what we do, and also, of course, test whatever we are inventing and whatever we're trying to use together with our system. Next slide, please. Well, how does the Water Drop Initiative support UN sustainability goals? And this is by providing financing and training too. And, you know, we're trying to support 1 acre farmers to make ends meet. I heard some interesting comments about how, you know, the smallhold farmers in the world, and especially in this case in India, they are lacking the confidence of making sure that they make enough money to support their families. And we're trying to move them in a direction where they at least feel more secure. We do this by delivering effective emission-free irrigation systems, and we give them the tools to produce more food on existing farmland. And what I mean by producing more food on existing farmland, well, our tests or our research has shown that by using micro-irrigation, and this is actually the first system that is providing the possibility of using micro-irrigation for the smallhold farmer without using any electric grids or diesel pumps. So we are actually using micro-irrigation, and thereby we're using less of the water source of the farmer, which means that they can actually have a second or even a third harvest on their existing farmland. And also we have proven that micro-irrigation actually gives a much more higher quality crop, because today most farms are flood irrigating their lands, which means that they're flushing a lot of good soil away, and they're actually using vast amounts of water instead of the amount that you need by using drip irrigation. We're actually claiming that you can save up to 80% of the water by using drip irrigation. And we are also doing this by giving them the opportunity to become independent from fossil fuels for irrigation. We also help the farmers to build water harvesting facilities to reduce groundwater use, which is also a very important thing, because groundwater levels are sinking all over the world, especially in India. Next slide, please. Well, what are the positive effects from all this? Well, our target is to help the smallhold farmer to increase their production with 100%. It's a bold statement. We can't really prove it, but we're targeting this goal, and we're working with universities in India, we're working with farmers in India, and we are jointly trying to improve food production together with them. And we are also sharing all our findings within this group. So we're all getting better at this by the week. And we are lowering the running costs by roughly 30% of the production cost by them not having to buy diesel for their diesel pumps or fuel for something else, or electricity or what have you. By doing this, compared to fossil fuel flood irrigation, we are saving about 80% of the water from the farmer's water source. And we're also saving about 700 kilos of CO2 emissions per farmer per year if they switch from diesel use to solar pumping. Next slide, please. Well, these are, as you all know, the 17 global goals of UN's Sustainability Development Program. And if you show the next slide, please, we are checkboxing, not all of them, but the majority of them, when we are introducing our systems to this community. We are lowering poverty. We are working against hunger. We are working, for good health and well-being. We are working for gender equality because we are helping the women not having to hand carry water to their crops. We are actually helping them to become very sufficient when it comes to micro irrigation, and so on and so on. Next slide, please. So we have a pilot that's ongoing. Henrik, who is the CEO, and we're actually coming to India in the next couple of weeks, and we are starting the educational programs with SIVA on 3 different locations in 3 different states in the northwest of India. And the pilot's purpose is to show that, and document, of course, that this is possible to increase food production on existing farmland using less fuel, less water, less energy, if you will. And then, of course, show the rest of the world that if you can do this with a couple of hundred, how about if we do this for a couple of 100,000? So that's the number 2 on the scale up, and the number 3, of course, our long-term goal is to build global presence for the Water Drop Initiative. We are absolutely not going to handle the Water Drop Initiative. It's our initiative from the beginning, but we need to hand it over to somebody else because we need people to become more efficient on their existing farmland, whether they buy our system or not. Next slide, please. I think that might have been the last one. Yeah, that was the last one. So thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you so much, and truly inspiring, and we look forward to see the scaling in India, and also, of course, the global scaling and the presence of Spoudi. So thank you for sharing these notes, and I think we have all different kinds of questions for you, so we'll make sure to collect them and send them to you after this webinar.
Thank you so much, and goodbye from Spain.
Bye-bye. So thank you for this first Swedish company. Now we are also introducing to this session Arjun Goyal. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, thank you.
From Cropin, excellent, Cropin, India. And you are a leading agri-tech business development, and you have UN agencies and multilateral institutions, governments and foundations. And you've been a former UNDP officer. You have more than 10 years of experience in business development and fundraising and building partnerships. So very interesting profile. And today you will speak about Cropin, which we are eager to learn more, but it's a SaaS-based solution. And yes. You are based where in India?
I'm based presently in New Delhi. Yeah.
In New Delhi, yes. So thank you so much for joining, and please continue with presenting your company and solution.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'd just like to have this control, which I cannot actually share my presentation right now.
Ah.
Yeah. Because when I open this share tray, I don't have this kind of a window where I can share my presentation.
Okay. Do you see the request control button in the?
I'll request my control again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's showing you didn't get the control. Your request for control was not accepted.
Okay. So let me check with the technical team.
Yeah.
How we can introduce you.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll start with my presentation. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, and thank you to Business Sweden for inviting us. Very humbled by the invitation and the kind words that have been spoken by you. Europe for us has been very exciting. You know, we have done a lot of projects there. As you rightly mentioned, that Cropin is actually one of the oldest agri-tech companies from India. And today we have operations around 52 countries. That includes 5 regions across the world. Typically, we cater two type of industries. One is the enterprise model, that is for the agri businesses, companies like Syngenta, BSF, Heineken, Nestle, etc. And our second business model is for the international development agencies and international institutions such as the World Bank, IFC, Mercy Cause Foundation, etc., to solve the problems around climate change and smallholder farmers. We offer SaaS technology to our clients, which includes 5 digital solutions that we have built. One is the Smart Farm solution, which is a complete holistic farm management solution, which provides you to play with the crop activities, crop platform, and the entire farming operations. And our second solution is a Smart Risk, which is a AI-enabled decision-making platform. Our third digital solution is the Root Trace.
Arjun, apologies for interrupting. I think so you can start sharing your screen if you might have got access to it, if you want to just test it out.
Yeah, so when I open this tray, I can't get a window out of here. So anyways, if you have the presentation I shared yesterday, you can have that presentation.
Sure, we will try and publish it. You can continue.
Yeah. So our third solution is the Root Trace solution, where we are working across the traceability, right from the seed and harvesting time to the post-harvesting. Our fourth solution is a smart way for the management of the warehouses. And our fifth solution is the smart sales, where we are working on the marketplace, and there we are working extensively with the government of India and especially government of Punjab for introducing an e-commerce platform where farmers can produce the sell, and it is integrated and interlinked with the traceability solution. The whole, like the data intelligence, how we are built is that we have an in-situ data platform, which is Smart Farm, which captures the data from the farms, including all types of seeds and fertilizers that have been put on the farm. And also it kind of integrates the entire and lets you plan the entire cropping and the plant life cycle. So it's a complete pioneering solution by Cropin. The second kind of data that we work is the Earth observation data, where we have partnered with the European Space Agency, and we use the data from Sentinel-1 and 2, where we have captured the data which includes indexes like NDVI, which helps us to see the plant health. The third is that we have partnered with the IBM for the veterinary intelligence. Yeah. Yeah, can you go to?
We have your presentation. Yes,
yes.
Please direct us.
Yes, go to the next slide. Yeah, so thank you. So our third data is from the weather intelligence, and we data modeling of these 3 type of sources. That is the in-situ data, the Earth observation data, and the weather data helps us to create intelligent solutions for our stakeholders. Our stakeholders include, the agri input companies, the financial lending institutions for whom we do underwriting, for the bank loans and the insurance. We have the insurance companies with us and the farming companies like the Nestle, Heineken, etc., and the seed production companies. And of course, working with the international development institutions and the governments to solve, macroeconomic policy for the countries. Here, I would like to have, if I can take you through. Yeah, I don't have, otherwise I had planned to show you the entire demonstration of our product. Anyways, so Rahul, can you take me to the next slide, please?
Yes, I'll just publish it again. Yep.
Yeah, so the Smart Farm provides you that ability to manage the complete farm, and you have the Smart Risk, where you have the data integration for the financial risk and solutions. Over here, we are working with the multilateral institutions, IFC and the World Bank. The model that we work is that at the grassroots level, we integrate the data for the agripreneurs and the farmer cooperatives, which help you to manage the underwriting for these banks and loans. And we create 2 products that are very important, which are called the Agri-Worthiness Report. And you have second, which is the in-season monitoring report. So the way it helps the banks and the insurance companies is that if you want to see the kind of plant health cycle, or you want to see whether the particular farmer has created a particular life cycle for the crop or not, and whether the proper indexes such as the NDVI have accurate data over the uh, plant health cycle. So this all is included in the agri-worthiness reports. The second is that we have the in-season monitoring reports, which provides end-to-end solution of regular monitoring to the banks, who can see whether a particular farmer and a survey number on the land has in fact done the entire operations or not. Now, this itself is also integrated with the crop cutting experiments, where you see the historical plot analysis for the last 5 years. And if the farmer is not able to produce the average yield of the past 5 years, then the insurance companies issues the particular insurance or the premium to the farmers. So this has been, the broadly our international development platform. One of the use cases that I would like to talk about, is the project that we are doing with Canara Bank and the IDBI and the ICICI Bank. In these projects, especially, we have partnered across 5 states in India, which is Maharashtra, Karnataka, Rajasthan, UP, and Punjab, where we are working with around 50,000 farmers to generate these agri-worthiness reports. This has a tremendous impact, for the governments and the agri-insurance companies, where the model of working with the agripreneurs helps you to create even entrepreneurship activities and opportunities on the ground. Next slide, please. Yeah, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so for us, sustainability includes, the platform is capable of functionality, reliability, visibility, configurability. You can integrate the whole ecosystem. For example, the smart risk can be integrated with the smart risk. The smart risk can be integrated with the root trace, and the root trace can be integrated with the marketplace. Rahul, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, next slide, please. The 14th slide. Yeah. So this, if you, Rahul, can you just hold on? So this is probably, a small snapshot of our Smart Farm Plus platform, where you can see that we do geotagging and georeferencing of the entire farm. And this data is integrated with the Earth observation satellite, which actually helps you to create the whole actionable insight and the business decision making opportunity and the system support system for the farmers as well as the agri businesses. Rahul, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so these are, the brief snapshots where you can see the farmer can actually use the entire platform to the smart farm, the whole farming data, and the whole process is integrated on the smart farm as well. And we have been working around 388 crop value chains, and working across 40 languages in 5 regions. Rahul, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is how the Cropin is and managing the entire the ecosystem, right from the farm management to the harvest to the market linkage and traceability and the supply chain management. Digitalization has been the way forward for us right from the past 10 years, and we believe for the sustainable food production, to optimize the supply chains and to reduce the leakages in particular value chains, as well as management of natural resources and environmental resources such as the water and the fertilizers and the seeds. Digitalization and our platforms are fully capable of offering those solutions to our agribusiness clients as well as the international development institutions. I would have really loved to demonstrate my the platform capabilities. But anyways, I open the platform for more invitations, and then I can do, one-to-one demonstration of my products. Anyways, thank you so much, Business Sweden. It was a very warm invitation from your side. And I take this opportunity, to call on your friends and clients, to interact with us and access the Cropin digital platforms for sustainable food production.
Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation, and we'll make sure to distribute what you want and need to the listeners and to the ecosystem here in Sweden. So thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch for the future. And I will now present the third and last speaker of this particular sustainable food production. So welcomes Safir Mosavi from Sweden and Swegreen. So you are an innovation and R&D lead of Swegreen, and you have a long tradition of ag tech and vertical farming innovation companies in your past. And we would like you to introduce Swegreen and what your offering is. So please, the presentation stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Maria, for the invitation. I assume that the presentation is up.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. So this is Seper Musavi from Stockholm. I'm one of the co-founders of Swegreen, which is a vertical farming initiative based in Stockholm that we started back in 2019 with a focus on disrupting the value chain and introducing a new innovative way of producing food inside different stores, malls, hotels, and restaurants. So basically, our innovation builds on three different facts. The first one is focused on the growing population of the planet and the very sharp urbanization trends that we have. We currently have 65% people living inside cities, and it's going very fast towards 80% by 2050. That's something that you experience highly, I guess, in India as well, and also the issues that we have with climate change. The second one is the issues that we have with carbon footprint of food. Too many actors in between farm and fork, basically. The problems that we have with intransparency and freshness of food, and also the mileage that food transports basically each day before it hits our table. So the third principle is basically how we could use these trends and technologies that are being introduced to our society to introduce back food as a function to our urban societies, amongst the other infrastructure that we have built for our cities, like waste management, energy management, ICT system, transportation, and so on. So the technology that we are using is called vertical farming, and it's built on a growing technique called hydroponics, that you don't need to use soil and you use water-rich nutrition to feed the plants, and you do them vertically. So it makes sense to bring food with a smaller footprint area to the cities and be able to have a good business case for that, as land is very scarce and also expensive inside cities. So the first project that we had was under this iconic building, which is the newspaper tower in Stockholm, as a farm on floor -3, which used to be one of the old archive rooms for the newspaper building. And we built a farm that is our research and development facility in 600 square meters area, that we could have actually like a potential of producing 5,000 tons of leafy greens and salads and herbs per year. And we are using that as an R&D facility to develop our technology. We worked on 4 different areas, which is the plant science, flow engineering, like energy engineering, ventilation systems, CFD modelings, and so on. We also focus on automation and use of small robots, and also digitalization of our systems and artificial intelligence in different senses, to be able to actually introduce urban farms to buildings and integrate them inside them, and try to cut this chain. Take out the distribution, the actors in between, and go directly to consumers, restaurants, and retail actors. We created a system for control of the plants based on edge computing to be able to keep the climate from a remote distance and to be able to control our farms. Then we built a system for connecting our plants. So our plants are very smart, they're all connected, and you could collect basically the input data of their climate condition, temperature, humidity, level of CO2, the different light that they receive, the airflow, and like the water flow that they receive, and so on. And then we completed that by trying to compile output data on performance of our plant, like how they taste, how fast they grow, and how they look, and so many other KPIs that we looked at to be able to actually use AI for these remote farming systems that we use. And if you wonder how we use artificial intelligence, it's quite easy. My example all the time is like that. Why Swedish strawberries are so good? And the answer is like that. The Swedish strawberries during the summer get very long days for doing a lot of photosynthesis and create a lot of sugar, but during the night the temperature falls down quite fast, so they don't get the opportunity to burn the sugar and create a lot of biomass and become chunky, so they're smaller but very sweet. And this is exactly the principle that you could try to follow for all other different types of plants to create basil genovese in Stockholm or in Gothenburg or in Mumbai inside a controlled environment farm. The next thing that we did was to define our service as a subscription model called farming as a service, so that we would be able to provide this new disruption model for stores to be able to farm inside their store. So I play a video clip for you to get a better understanding of what farming as a service means basically.
Imagine having nutritious, well-tasting fresh produce all year, regardless of climate, season, or weather conditions. Imagine optimal growing conditions, providing the best quality leafy greens on the market, grown in the most environmental friendly way. And think of having this all year, all day, round the clock, as close to the customers as it ever can get. Sweetgreen's in-store platform is a fully integrated vertical farming service based on world-leading innovations. We call it farming as a service, making any supermarket or restaurant owner their own urban farmer. Able to offer fresh produce to their customers, daily harvested directly off the shelf. Sweetgreen's farming as a service in-store platform is based on digital monitoring and artificial intelligence, mimicking nature indoors by providing, controlling, and optimizing the exact temperature, irrigation, lights, nutrients, and climate. This gives better taste, higher nutrition, and more sustainable greens with longer shelf time. And customers will get hyper-locally produced leafy greens at an affordable price.
So let me play another clip for you to see how we install these units inside the stores to get a better idea. So as you saw, this is the first fully automated and AI-driven in-store platform for farming. This is another farm that we have. So we operate 5 different farms in 5 different mega stores in Sweden at the moment, and we're looking for expansion both like nationally and internationally in a later stage. So this is the full unit like in production from the official Instagram account of Sweden. So take a look at this one as well, and then I give you some insight into us, for example, having a potential in the Indian market. So today we are producing more or less 60 different types of leafy green salads, like including kales and lettuces and different herbs. In Swedish supermarkets, we have a goal to be able to provide more than 200 different sorts that we are doing in Stockholm based in this system. And obviously, I mean, India is a very interesting market. I mean, you have an agricultural-based economy that is traditional, is changing, and it also has led to a lot of urbanization and people moving to the cities. One of the highest urbanization trends that you follow there. It's a very populated country, and the diet is basically vegetable based to a very high extent. And there is also like a modernization trend that we see, like both technical wise and also like the lifestyle wise. So we see a lot of potential actually, like for us being present in a market like India and vertical farming to start becoming more and more trendy in India. I know there are like some smaller initiatives that have started working with that, but I see a big potential for vertical farming in India for urban food production as a complementary system to the traditional and like, you know, sub-urban and the urban and the basically like the rural agriculture and the system that you guys have. So these are the contacts to our company. You could follow us very much like on LinkedIn, take a look at our web page and Instagram. And if you like to stay in touch, I would be super happy to do so. So thank you, Business Sweden, for the invitation. I don't know if you have like a Q&A session or not, but I'll be here.
Thank you so much. We are happy to have you with us today, and thank you for an excellent presentation. I think that our 3-hour program is a bit too crowded to also include questions, but we will make sure to do all the relevant follow-ups for your company, and I think this is of high interest for all of us to learn more about. So thank you for joining us, and talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. So I hope that you all have energy and more time in your schedule to also listen into our 3rd and final session on food security between Sweden and India. And we will actually start with introducing a Swedish company called Innocentia and their CEO, Erik Månsson. He has built several organizations from scratch, and he seems to be a true entrepreneur. And today he's going to teach us more about Innocentia and food waste management. So Erik, without any further ado, the presentation stage is yours.
So let me see if you guys can hear me right.
I can hear you, I can see you. Seem to be some connection issues, perhaps. Is he rejoining, or should we move to the next company?
We have Renuka as well. Maybe if we can move to the next company, we can slot in Eric after this. Yeah, Eric
Oh,
is
he's
back.
back. Hi, Eric.
Hey guys. Let's see now. Do you guys hear me?
We can hear you. We can see you.
Okay, perfect. The system
Welcome.
threw me out when I was going to start speaking. So, but now I'm back. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay, so perfect. Hi everyone. My name is Eric Manson. I'm the CEO of the company in Essentia. Thanks for the nice presentation, Maria. Although I can't take credit for being a true entrepreneur, I would say, because I have actually not started the company. I was recruited a couple of years back, but doing everything that an entrepreneur daily does, with except for owning the company, I would say, and that's delightful. I'm just right now I'm at the university in Malmö. We're just starting up our microbiology lab here. So this morning I've been going around the outskirts of Malmö trying to find the right cord to connect a gas bottle to a machine. So I guess that's also a part of sort of running a business, trying to fix the small things. So to take it a little bit from the beginning, we're super happy to be here at this webinar, since we are very, very happy to be working a lot with India and with our Indian colleagues. The company in Essentia was founded about 6 years ago in the south of Sweden by a couple of Swedes and a guy from India called Rambaba Atluri, who is a PhD in chemistry, and he's now running and heading our lab. He's the CTO of the company, and he is managing a team of 12 engineers in the outskirts of Hyderabad at the moment. So that means that we have daily contact over the borders, and a lot to do with each other. And at the moment, he's actually here in Malmö with us as well. So for us, the Indian-Sweden connection is really, really strong, and something that we build the company on, basically. So a little bit about who we are. Founded in 2015 in south of Sweden, as I said, building on a chemistry technology that is sort of providing the basics of the innovation when it comes to indicating the status of food in real time. So it's a chemical technical solution, but that we transfer then to the end consumer friendly food tech solution, I would say. So usually today I used to say that we are a food tech company. It's a bit more understandable than saying that we are a chemical technical company. But technology wise, we are both of those things, I would say. So I have a few slides just to take you through a little bit about what we do. Let's see if I can get the control here for managing them. I ask for the permission there, Maria. Is it you who gives that, or?
It's my colleagues in the New
Eric,
Delhi office.
press once more.
Okay. Now, okay. Now I can share, but you guys have the presentation, right? Or otherwise, you guys can show it, and I can just ask you to.
Okay.
To change the slide.
So we'll present. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Probably easier. Don't waste as much time. Yeah. So you guys can move. We can start directly with moving to the next slide there. Exactly. So yeah. Then just to take you through why we do what we do. We're a company trying to provide an alternative to the current expiry date system that we're using for food. You all know them. It's the best before dates. It's the use by dates that we have, causing us a lot of waste, because there's a lot of safety margin built into that system, and they're also based on self-control. So every single producer can set their own dates, and usually they don't push that dates, enough for us to use the full potential of the food. So when the product reaches its expiry date, it usually has a number of extra days left, and that's something that we want to solve. And it results in really big losses. In terms of numbers of animals, it's 5.7 billion animals that we're throwing away. Most of them are not full animals, but parts of animals that combined becomes a huge number. It's values of about, oh, now there's a lot of sound in the background, sorry about that. But values of about 170 billion euros that we throw away. And about 61% of that waste happens with the end consumer. So that's something that we want to target our solution to help the end consumer to actually take better decisions when it comes to food waste. Let's go to the next slide. So yeah, as I said, the producers are responsible here, setting dates generally with big safety margins, resulting in that about 20 to 30% of the shelf life in a product is lost. And yeah, mainly has to do with the expired dates that we're using. So go to next slide, please. So that's why we are introducing what we are calling dynamic shelf life labels. So we want to enable, instead of a static shelf life, we want to enable a dynamic shelf life that takes into consideration that every single product is a sort of a sole entity and can vary very much when it comes to bacterial levels and how fast it deteriorates. So if we are able to measure every single product instead of a batch level, I mean, today when we set the expiry date, you set the same date on the full batch that is produced the same day in the factory, but that could vary up to a week in terms of the product. So we provide one label that is printed with our reactive ink. And it's placed inside the package and reacts with the gases emitted in the degradation process, and that those gases are creating a color shift, going from white to purple in this case. So it's an indication for the end consumer where you can see in real time whether the product is good or not to eat. You can go to the next slide. So basically how it works, as I said, there are certain gases emitted in the degradation process when there are bacteria that evolves. They are called volatile organic compounds, a special type of gas mixes, and they react with the inks that we have developed. We have a couple of these for our different types of labels, and then they react and changes the color of the label. Please go to the next slide. And yeah, basically, I mean, it's a great idea, it's a great product, but there needs to be some kind of business behind it if we're gonna induce it into the food industry, which is a super low margin industry, and they need to every time think about what's left at the end of the day after the sales. So for us, it's a lot about finding what are the values here except for the food waste reduction, which is of course a value for everyone. One of the things that we have found is that there is a willingness to pay with the end consumer, possible price premium that we have validated in service and other sort of tests that we have done. But there's also, of course, the brand value for the product owner. We know, I mean, I don't have to preach about how important sustainability will be in the future, also in terms of end consumer demand. But I think especially for food producers, and we work a lot with meat now in the beginning, and they will be very aware of the sort of challenges they will have with end consumers demanding more sustainable products, and this is something that they can do to enhance their brand value in terms of that. So let's go to next slide. Yes, exactly. So it's a little bit different when it comes to producers and retailers. So our customers are mainly producers, but could also be retailers with their own brands, and they benefit from these sort of values in a little bit different ways. But what's important here is to understand that the food value chain is very much connected, and we need to cater to basically all of these in order to make sure that we can change the behavior and system that we have today. So we can go to next slide. So yeah, one of the things that we know that we can do is increase the margin for these two players. For the producers, we know that we can increase in up to 18%. I think it's actually should be 20. And for retailers, it's up to 10%, which for them is a big margin change from what they have today. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, and we're talking to some big players right now in terms of testing this out. We're still in the product development phase. They are working really hard in Hyderabad to calibrate the labels, and very soon we will be starting to test this out with some of these players. But also a few other more global players that we're talking to. So that's really exciting, and that will be coming up during the spring. Let's go to next slide. But Maria, I'm guessing I don't have that much time left. So let me just round things off.
Time is always crucial with time.
It's always an essence. It's always hard when you talk about your own solutions.
But so please feel free to wrap up when you have time
I'm wrapping
to wrap up.
So basically, I can just say, so the analog label that I presented here is the first of what we believe to be many labels that we will be developing. We have a digital also in the pipeline, where we have a prototype right now, and we're looking at sort of temperature labels as well. There will be several solutions in order to secure an alternative for the best before date system, I would say. And there's a few patents as well that's currently pending that we will build this on. As a final note here, as said, for us the collaboration with India will continue to be strong. We will keep our R&D in Hyderabad, where we have an easy sort of inlet of competence and great people that we can recruit. So for us, I mean, it's super important to continue to create these connections, and we're happy to be part of that in what's happening in the area, and happy to be here today on this webinar. So I think I'll stop there. I can talk much more about this, and if any one of you listening today wants to talk to me about it, I'm all ears, and let's just schedule a meeting. And I will try at that point to be somewhere where there's not this much sound in the background. So thanks a lot for today.
Thank you for joining. I'm sure we will have reason to touch base very soon again. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you,
guys. Speedy moving ahead, introducing Bioprime Agri Solutions and Renuka Divan, founder that has a PhD in plant sciences from University of Pune, and she has extensive publications and over 13 years of experience working in the field. So please welcome and tell us what Bioprime Agri Solutions is all about. The presentation stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen and you can hear me well as.
Yes, may we ask you, Renuka, to use the presenter mode, because now we have it in working mode, so it's a little bit small. The picture is not coming in full screen.
Okay, I'll try again once more. Otherwise, you can share from your end.
Yes, so if you press the full screen, it should be a little bit easier to see your pictures.
Yes.
Thank
Just
you.
give me a minute.
So we have learned to be very patient when it comes to technical issues during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, and somehow it always happens that on these days you end up with bad bandwidth.
Yes,
so can you see the full screen now?
No, we cannot actually, but
okay, so then I'll stop sharing and I'd request you to share.
Yes, I think so. We'll try and organize and get your presentation on. Just bear with us.
No problem. So till then, I would just like to begin by thanking you for giving us this opportunity. We are truly humbled. It is incredible listening to all the speakers. I've been here since the morning, so it's really wonderful, and has been really enlightening to listen to
different stories and views of the same ecosystem. So really thankful for that. Thank you, Rahul, for the presentation. So today I'll be talking about food security and especially about how in India we're looking at feeding over 1 billion of our people. Next slide, please, Rahul. So I need not highlight the crisis that the world, especially India, is going through. I think a lot has been spoken on this since the morning. I'd just like to chip in here and say that at BioPrime, we are especially focusing on two main aspects. One is the climate change related impact on productivity, and the second is the smallholder farmer. The reason we choose to focus on both of these is a large number of our farmers are smallholder farmers, and climate change impacts them to a very large extent. Next slide, please. And though we've been speaking about the crisis, even throughout the years, there have been some success stories in India. So we've become one of the first developing countries to become secure in terms of grain production, and now our agenda lies on how to build on this success. So India works on a lot of programs in Asia and Africa to strengthen sustainability and food security. So for us as a country, food security is a policy goal, and we're focusing on ensuring that this can be adopted by smallholder farmers in Asia and Africa. Next, please. So what do we do or what do we build on? So some of the key challenges, and I'm going to highlight a little bit about this is because these are some of the aspects that we also work on, is how do we organize the farmers? How do we make the agriculture practices sustainable? And how do we de-risk the farm incomes? And all of this are very crucial questions, and a lot of Indian companies, a lot of Indian startups have been addressing these issues. So, and all of the time while focusing on doubling of farmer income as a national goal. Next, please. Rahul, can you? Yes, thank you. So just to talk about what all do we see in the Indian ecosystem. So we see a lot of technologies have emerged in organizing the farmers, whether it is for their buying capacity, e-marketplaces, market linkages, smart supply chains, traceability and blockchain, and in sustainable agriculture practices where the advisories are being digitized. There's weather forecasting available, precision and automation is now being available. And we see a lot of startups and a lot of activity in financing, credit scores, crop insurances that are coming up. So Indian AgTech has been picking up with a great speed lately. Next, please. Unfortunately, I think we've spoken on this in the morning as well. Mark was highlighting that unfortunately, as opposed to other places, we see that the ag biotech has not picked up in India as much, and we've kind of discussed about the underlying problems about this. But I wanted to highlight this because this is an aspect that we work on. So while there is a lot of activity and there's in other countries, the opportunity in India lies in developing traits, developing accelerated breeding, and developing smarter inputs for the crops. Next, please. Which brings us to what do we do? So at BioPrime, we develop biologicals, which are based on small molecules that modulate different plant responses. And we do this so that we can modulate responses and crops can become climate resilient. So we focus on identifying, discovering, and developing biomolecules that work on the basic plant processes. Next, please. We do this by the aid of our platform. It's a high throughput screening platform, which we call as Sniper. So Sniper is a smart nanomolecules induced physiological response. This platform was developed with the support and funding from our governments, Startup India, Department of Biotechnology, Indian Agriculture Research Institute. So this is the basis of how we discover the biomolecules that we're interested in, whether they are for climate change related impact, whether they are for developing new biofungicides, or whether they are for insecticides and pesticides. Next, please. So what is it that Sniper Biologicals are able to do? So we focus basically on closing the yield gap. So because of the changing climatic conditions, the very processes in plants that are responsible for nutrient uptake, reproduction, flowering and fruiting are not functioning at a good efficiency. Sometimes they're functioning as low as 40% of efficiency. So we are trying to fix these processes, get the processes to function at a normal level. And due to this, what the farmer sees is that there's a widening gap between what the yield is possible versus what he sees in his field. And we're trying to reduce this yield gap as much as possible for the farmer. For us, since these products are based on physiological processes, they are crop agnostic and can be adopted by farmers on as-is, where-is basis. They're certified organic products and are also tested as residue-free. Next, please. So currently, we have our first generations of products that have been launched into the market. We've tested the products in 4 states and commercially launched them in the 4 states. What we typically see for the farmers is reduction in crop losses, decrease in input cost, and increase in productivity. I'd like to present some use cases. Next, please. So typically for grape farmers, if a harvest in a previous year is delayed, it impacts his crop in the next year. And to overcome this, he starts using more and more hormones, which in turn reduces his productivity the next year. And he kind of gets locked into a loop, which also means that for him, only a certain percentage of his produce is at a quality which becomes export oriented. So he gets caught into a loop of having to put in high amount of inputs and not being able to sell his produce at an export cost. This is where our interventions were able to earn the farmer, even in the pandemic, an extra yield. Next, please. This is another case of farmers who were growing flowers, and they were able to capture markets which are farther away from their own markets, actually from Maharashtra to Telangana state, where they got a higher market price and therefore were able to double their incomes. They were able to do this because of 2 things. One is they were able to get higher yields, and second is they were able to have a better shelf life. Combining both of these, they were able to collect the produce, store the produce, and send the produce outside. Next, please. Next slide, please. Rahul, can you change the slide? Yes, thank you. So I'd just like to conclude with the journey so far. Till now, we've identified 2 lead molecules, which are non-hormone based promoters. They are at a formulation level. We've launched them commercially. And currently, India has launched its new biostimulant policy, where we'll be one of the first countries to give registration to these kind of products. So we will be registering these products pretty soon. So that's about us. That's about the work that we do at BioPrime. I'd like to thank you all for giving us an opportunity to present our work here, and would also love to speak with anybody who is interested for collaborations or development. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing, and very, very interesting. So our last and final speaker for today, concluding this session on food security, is Rema Subramanian. I hope I pronounced that somewhat correctly. From Anchor Capital, and Anchor Capital was co-founded by Rema as a vision to use her decades of experience in entrepreneurship to bring new young startups to become game changers. So thank you, Rema, for joining us, and we look forward to hear your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Just give me a second while I share. I assume that I have the request control. Do I need to do request control? How do I?
No, I think so. You can share your screen if you could.
I can share
the
my
shared content.
screen. I am, yeah. Just, so I think somewhere the share content slideshow. Yep. Can you see this?
Yes, something's coming up. We are there. Yes, we can see your screen. All good.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks to the Indo-Swedish for having me here. I'm really sorry, I couldn't send the presentation on time. So basically, I'm sorry that I would need to do the presentation. I hope that's okay with you guys and it doesn't get into any technology challenges out here. Thanks again. And it was really I did listen in to the last 2.5 hours of presentation, and it was really good to see the kind of work that's happening in Sweden and in India. And
hey, you called or what?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, Rima, we can hear you. All good.
Yeah. Okay. Now I heard somebody else coming. Yeah. Okay. So while I'm the last person to speak,
yes.
I'd assume that, since I'm looking at the investment end of some of these areas, that it would be interesting enough for folks to hang on and listen in. I would love to connect with a lot of guys who had spoken earlier because there was a lot that was in common with what I'm going to say. At Anchor Capital, to just give you a brief in this, is the fact that we are an early stage fund and we invest into transformative technologies, not only for the next billion in India, but for the 5 billion globally. One of the biggest challenges that we know in terms of food security is all about the availability, accessibility, and absorption. And today's sessions had spoken a lot about each of these. I would like to focus on the availability part of it, and especially around the technologies bit of it, because that's where we come in. And while some of the earlier speakers had spoken about the fact that there's not much happening in India in this space, I think that things are changing a lot. We're now seeing a lot of biotech companies like Renuka. We have a couple in our portfolio which is looking at the space, that this space is changing. India now has a lot of cutting edge startups that are looking at the using biotech, gene biologics, some of these that are coming up, right? So the fact that while accessibility and absorption is being addressed by a lot in India, I think that the biggest opportunity is basically in the availability space. India has been known for being a technology player in the past, and they have been in the IT technologies. I agree with Mark, what he had said in the earlier conversation, that there's been a lot of folks, Indians working in Boston, but I would like to say is the fact there are now Indians working within India and are looking to take their companies global. Right? So that's where we are very, very bullish on investing into these companies, not only in India, but also globally as well, because we think that's where the next opportunity from an investment is going to be. Accessibility is there, but that's the regular VC space, but the real challenge is the real opportunity is in the availability space. Right? In the availability space, if you look at it from the canvas is pretty large. The productivity that we have currently, I think, is we've still just scratched the surface. What can be done with advances in the entire biotech space? We would be able to build better seed, not only better seeds, but which are pest resistance. And the opportunities is not just in terms of a positive productivity because you have a better seed and you are able to grow more or your yield does more, but also because of the fact that it's now less pest resistance, you have lesser water that's required. Not only do your costs go down, but there's also there's an effect of the production of pesticides, and so the negative cascading effect that happens because all of that can also create a very positive effect in terms from a sustainable agriculture space. And I think we've just scratched the surface. So if you look at productivity in India or globally, that it could go 10x to where we are. And as more and more pressure comes on land, I think that the need to have yield productivity is going to be much higher. So that's where the opportunity lies. And it's good to see that there's a lot of work happening, not just in India, but also globally in this space, right? And that's seen by the amount of biotech funds that are being set up. The fact that the consumers are looking for organic, naturally grown food, or the fact that there's less wastage because the amount of food that gets wasted. So like whether it's on the retail shelf or whether it is because of the fact that not all the fresh fruits and vegetables are not really are not transported by cold chain, because significant part of production happens in countries where cold chain is not possible. So obviously there's a huge wastage because of that. And so are there other technologies? And there's actually a lot of science that has already gone in earlier, but what's happened is the fact the use cases have not been there. So I think what we are now going to see is a lot more use cases come in, apart from the fact that there's also pure science as well that would make it better and better. Bioengineered seeds, and this is intervention at the gene level, and these are not modified crops, but it's essentially just bioengineering so that you have better productivity. So that the space is really huge, that is it. And today's conversations, there was a lot about cell-based meat and substitutes for meat. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that because there's been a lot that's spoken. I would just want to add as a fact that there are companies in India that are now working in this space. And that is where we see the opportunity for collaboration between India and of course, the nutrition, there's of proteins, alternate proteins. Now, if I were to look at the opportunities that's happening in India, fermentation, for example, I know of at least 10 companies in India which are now looking at fermentation technologies. And some of these, for example, one of the companies that we have invested in is now looking at setting up global plants across 4 continents. And these are global JVs for proteins, not just for human consumption, but also actually for aqua, for poultry, for going into other areas. So it could be for cosmetics and other areas as well. So that's one. There's another one which is looking at food supplements. These are all based on fermentation technologies. So fermentation is an area that has huge potential. there is a lot of work that's happening in India. And it would be good to see if there are, what are the kind of collaborations that we can have with Swedish organizations as well in this space. It could be in terms of technology collaborations, or it could be in terms of investment collaborations. I'm actually skipping a lot of areas where I know there's a lot of conversations that have happened in the earlier part of the day, so it doesn't make sense for me to repeat all of that. So I'm focusing more on the fact that these are things that's happening in India. And what's currently happening in India is the fact that there is companies that have done it at lab scale and at pilot scale. They're all now at pilot scale. What is needed is investments to take it to commercial scales, both in India and globally. The Indian market, in many cases, like was spoken in some of the earlier conversations, is limited in many of these, and these have to be global scale for it to be commercially viable. But some of these technologies can really make a big difference because they are also based on cost efficiency as being one of the lead factors. So to give you an example is the fact that the company that I spoke about, in which we have invested, typically fermentation plants could be large fermentation plants would be needed, which could mean that you would need to invest into tens of millions of dollars to set up one plant, versus the fact that this company is looking at a technology which can be put up in smaller fermentation units, which can be incorporated even within, say, a smaller poultry farm, so that you can have a circular economy set up. So the waste of the poultry farm gets into the smaller fermentation. It's almost like the beer fermenters that you have in some of the restaurants, this kind of thing. And then that could go back into beet protein feed for the chickens itself, right? So those are the kind of things that's coming out of India. And a large part of globally would need that kind of innovations, the ones that are cost effective, but still are very, very cutting edge. And so that's the power that India has. And it'd be really good to see how the next round of capital would be available for a lot of these companies, because today there are very few of us in India who invest into such areas. And it would be good for follow-on capital, we actually look at global players to come in. And that is a space that I think that is something that could be of interest for investors in this audience to look at, how we could collaborate to take some of these innovations to scale globally. Quickly, I would just talk about the fact this has already been covered of how all these are where the large funds have been going in, and I think the earliest conversations have all covered on that. So I'm not going to spend too much time, but just to say that what you see in the West is a lot which is based consumer focused. What we can see in India is that is going to be a lot in terms from a supplier focused innovations. And these could be supplier focused as well as to say the fact that could be more yield, because for India to go up in the value chain, we have to see how we become suppliers to the globe from a technology perspective. And we have the technologies now, we have people working on it, we have people like Renuka who are there, and that is what we would like to do. Some of our investments, for example, Cropin, which presented earlier, String Bio was the one that I spoke about, which is setting up sustainable alternate proteins that can be a circular economy. It can go towards converting methane into alternate proteins, and they are the ones who are now setting up for 4 plants globally with this. So that's a Agrix is another one which is looking at wastage is an area. So that gives an overall scope of what we do. I would again reiterate that India is at the cusp of a lot of technology innovations, and would be happy to collaborate with folks who are looking at both from trying to source innovations, trying to look for collaborations on innovations, as well as looking for investments. So that's where I leave it with, saying that we are at a stage where I think that a lot is possible for collaborations. I'd like to end this on a positive note to say it's the fact that we have a lot to say.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Very, very interesting and a perfect wrap up to this very dynamic day, I must say. Thank you for joining us, Rima. I'm sure we will touch base within short.
Absolutely. Look forward to that. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Yes, so Rahul, we are at the very end, right?
Yes, and I hope the webinar was informative and very insightful. A lot of perspectives, a lot of discussions on different parts of the value chain, and a sincere vote of thanks to everyone who participated and everyone who gave their valuable insights and time. Both from India and Sweden, I think so. This is a starting point, a platform where collaboration happens. And as I said at the start, it's taken time for such a platform to set up, and I don't know why, because there's so much of happening on both sides. And let's see if going forward we use this as a platform for accelerating more collaboration and ideas. As Rima suggested, I think so. There's a lot of technology innovations happening in India, and Sweden already has tried and tested models and services which are ready for global scale up. So there is opportunities for both of us to discuss. So us again, I would just close it with sincere thanks to everyone who's participated, especially Good Food Institute for giving us valuable knowledge partner access, and Try Swedish for being the campaign partner for this first ever India-Sweden Agri Food Tech webinar. Going forward, we'd like to ask you to, because if you find something interesting and if you like to collaborate or speak to someone, you can book a fika with us. For those who are non-Swedish, a fika is a Swedish coffee and a very casual way of chatting with us and sharing ideas and notes. So please book a fika with us in Stockholm with Maria, or with us in Delhi and Bangalore. We have 2 offices. But do reach out to Business Sweden or visit our website for understanding your opportunities in India and Sweden market. In case you have an India strategy which you want to validate, we are more than happy to validate with us, and you have a network of SMEs who can do it more sharply for you. Matchmake, if you like someone you've in your presentation from both Sweden and India perspective, you can reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to share the match with you and be your connectors over here. We also like to share that we have a business incubation service for Swedish companies who are wanting to land safely in India and expand. We have business incubation services which we can more than happy to walk you through and give you more comfort on how this is done. Finally, not the least, I think so, to fund your international growth, be it India, we have a dedicated growth funding support team which can help you get access to funding and funding sources in different parts of the world, be it India, be it Sweden, or be it Nordic areas. So we have a team of specialists who can help you fund your international growth. And if you're looking for expanding in India, we can more than happy to help you. For Indian companies who are looking to get into Sweden and explore the Nordic area, again, we have a dedicated invest team who can help you navigate the market in Nordic areas and explore markets there. Closer in November, we are having an India Roadshow. This is an open invitation for Swedish companies who would like to come and meet us in person. From 8th to 12th, we are in different cities in Sweden, from Stockholm, Luleå, Gothenburg, Malmö, and again back to Stockholm. So please do reach out to us in case you want to meet us in person. We'll be discussing about overall India opportunities, but we'll definitely have food as a priority sector for discussing. So we'll have Maria who will be there in some of the sessions, but I'll try and see if I can travel there. But again, there'll be someone from Business Sweden who can help you understand and take the discussion forward. that's where I'd like to thank you for the wonderful last 3 years. You can reach out to either Maria or me. I'm based out in New Delhi, and Maria is in Stockholm. Thank you very much for the wonderful past 3 years, and thank you for being patient. And as being the first webinar, we had a logistics challenges, but that goes with every webinar. So thank you for being patient. And the next time, either it'll be we'll try to make it a physical seminar in the next year, but watch out for this space, or watch out for the second India Food Tech webinar, India Sweden. Maria, if you would like to close with any more comments, but
as always, you summarized it brilliantly. So thank you for collaboration both between Sweden and India. And I've learned a lot today. I've tried to keep track of both the webinar and moderating, but also to learn and I'm so thankful that we actually made this happen. Thanks to all the speakers, thanks to the audience for your patience, and we look forward to bright collaborations between our countries.
thank you.
So have a good rest of the day.